Welcome to Mr. O'Keefe's Book Club Podcast, Season 1, Episode 2, where we're diving into the great book by Kate DiCamillo, The Hotel Balzaar. In this episode, we're looking and reading and reflecting on chapters 2 through 4, which is pages 11 through 27. And we start off in the beginning of this chapter where Kate DiCamillo basically talks about Marta and her boring and monotonous life, counting stairs, just observing, looking around, and not really doing too much. So as you can imagine, for a young girl who's not supposed to talk, that's supposed to be as quiet as a mouse, not bring attention to herself, of course, that's what she dreams of. And what's interesting is when you don't have a lot in life, little things that are beautiful and different can mean so much. And it kind of really is interesting because, again, too often we're showered with gifts where we have so much and we're always looking for the next interesting thing. And yet here we are with Marta, and the author introduces that she has these wonderful items in her little room with her mother, and her mother brings them back. That the author says that Marta's mother often brought Marta things that people had left behind in their rooms. And the first thing that we get an idea about here that she gets is these elegant embroidered slippers that were too big for Marta's feet. Yet Marta treasures it, and her mother says to Marta, your father, who knows, it's possible that maybe someday that you'll grow into these shoes. Your father has very large feet. You remember? I remember, said Marta. Thank you, Mama. Right? So she put the slippers beside the bed. She sat there, and they sat there in their embroidered glory, waiting either for Marta's feet to become enormous or for her father to return. Which was more likely? OMG. Which is more likely? So again, you can sense that this is what she's longing for. Is her father going to return? And something else that is interesting, it's an empty bottle of perfume. And what's on this bottle of perfume? If you're a fan of Kate DiCamillo, if you've read the Beatrice Prophecy, the label that was pasted on this empty bottle of perfume was beautiful and elaborate. It features a smiling mermaid with a green tail and yellow hair. It just absolutely amazing that this mermaid, who is such a big part of one of her other books, authors will do this. They'll have preferences, they'll have favorites, and clearly when you're reading children, one of the things that you know that if you're reading well and you're understanding and you're comprehending is if you have these connections. So we then learn that Marta's mother is Elena, and that there's also this item that's in the room. It's an envelope, and on the front is written Marta's mother's name, Elena Buccelli. So obviously that's Marta's name as well. The letters addressed Elena Buccelli and Marta Buccelli, of course. The exact words Marta's father had written on the envelope were, and Marta Buccelli too, of course. How Marta loved those two words. Of course, of course. That's how chapter 2 ends, which is just, again, you can just sense the love percolating out of this book, and the longing that you clearly see that Marta has for her father, and wanting to find him, wanting to know where he is. You're already thinking, reflecting on this. As we head into chapter 3, we're introduced to clearly what's going to be a big, huge character in this book. Right before the clock struck noon, there was a commotion in the lobby. A gust of cold air entered, and with it came an old woman dressed in all red. Red shoes and red hat and a red dress. She was leaning on a cane, and on her shoulder there perched a massive green feathered parrot. Of course, there's going to be a parrot, which, again, is just so wonderful. Whenever you get introduced, the author, one theme that I'm going to be talking about children throughout these book club podcasts is authors do introduce characters, and whenever they do, you got to pay attention to specifically how they describe the character. Now, some books don't have pictures. In this one, on the next page, we can see what this character looks like, this countess. And I'm going to get to this, but OMG, you'll see something in this picture on page 18 that will take your breath away if you read the first book. And this is something that I wanted to allude to that I think is important. Although there are separate stories in this trilogy, The Puppets of Spellhorse and now the Hotel Balzaar, they're a trilogy, so they have some connections. They have to have some connections. You want there to be some connections. Well, on page 18, I'll tell you right away, here we are, a specific drawing of this countess, what she looks like, what the parrot looks like, and sure enough, in her luggage, one of the pieces of luggage says on there, Spellhorse. Could this have some kind of connection to the first book? Could this possibly be one of the characters that comes from the first book? That's a huge part about us looking forward in the rest of this book. Will there be some type of connection? So, as we go along here, what we basically learn here now is that this parrot, apparently according to the Countess, was an old general. The parrot's name is Blitzkopf. I will tell you a secret about Blitzkopf, said the Countess. He was once a man. Yes, he was once a man who was a very great general. So right away, just like puppets, we have some element of fantasy here. Is this just a ruse, which is kind of like a trick, which is, this Countess just throwing in something that, she believes that just could be made up, or is this possibly some type of truth here? So truly, said Martha, at the end of chapter 3, the Countess smiled. Yes, room 314, that's where I am. Come as soon as you can. I have a story to tell you. It is a story that you will find quite interesting, I'm sure. Marta's heart skipped a beat. Room 314, said the Countess again. You will not be sorry. In this chapter also, chapter 3, something that's interesting that you can learn from is the author introduces another character, and of course, in the hotel lobby, a person that's always going to be there, in addition to the bellman, would be the person at the counter. And we learn that this gentleman's name is Alphonse La Montrain. I've never been good with pronunciations. I took speech when I was in second grade. But ultimately, here's what Norman tells Marta about this gentleman at the counter, Alphonse. Alphonse, Norman had once said to Marta, was a man who was perhaps too fond of the straight edge. What does that mean, Marta had asked. It means, said Norman, that life will never allow itself to be straightened, and it will drive you mad a little if you keep trying to straighten it. Too many rules with that man, always. He will become unwell after a time. You watch and see. Life always wins. Life and its crooked lines will always win. What a great metaphor, and what a deep type of explanation as to the personality of this man at the counter, Alphonse. And ultimately, when you get some type of great metaphor here that the author throws out, you don't want to pass by it, friends. You want to stay there with it and think, because when you think and when you try to figure something out, it is not something that you should be passive with. You have an opportunity to learn here. So ultimately, especially on some of these, great critical thinking questions, what you need to ask yourself is, okay, so this metaphor about him being perhaps too fond of the straight edge, what can that mean? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If you think differently than what I'm going to say here, and you can email me, as always, boys and girls, your thoughts, your questions, your reflections on this episode and these chapters. My email is kevmok21@gmail.com. But here's what I think. This gentleman, for whatever reason, sticks by the rules. And the rules mean more than breaking the rules. So if you have a personality like this, well, guess what? You're not necessarily going to be happy if something comes your way that upsets the normal course of things. You may not be able to be steadfast and move forward and be able to address these changes and these tragedies and these things that come your way in life that are not expected or that are different. Life is about getting back up when you fall down, and life is about being able to really address and respond to things that are not on the straight and narrow, that are not normal, that are not expected. So what are you going to do about that? And a well-rounded person is able to deal with a lot of this. So I think that's where this secondary character, and so many great books, in my opinion, friends, have secondary characters that are just as meaningful, and you really want to find out about them as well as the primary characters. And in this case, I want to learn more about Alphonse. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Would you like to have more information on Alphonse as we go through the book? That would be interesting to see. We can also get a sense of the personality of the Countess on page 20 when she's coming in and she needs the luggage to be checked. Ultimately, she says, "All the luggage must come in," said the Countess, "and I will have your best room, of course." "Of course," said Alphonse, the clerk at the front desk. "May I inquire," Alphonse says, "may I inquire how long you will be staying with us?" And what does the Countess say back? "You may not inquire." So clearly, she thinks a lot of herself. She thinks she's important. You can infer, friends, that when you have a lot of money, you can do a lot of things in life. And one other interesting insight into her personality, and that she says when, towards the end of this chapter, she says, "I am very fond of children," said the Countess, "very fond indeed." And she says to Marta, you must come and visit us." Not only visit herself, but to visit the parrot. And speaking of the parrot, Marta asks towards the end of chapter 4, "Does he speak?" "At the present moment," the Countess says, "he is keening." "Great word," said the Countess, "which means that he is feeling regrets, Generals have very, very many things to regret, as you well imagined. And now just to wrap up our episode and chapter 4, I'll read the very end of the chapter, which again, the author does great in ending with a bang. In any case, Marta, my dear, I find that I am suddenly very weary. The journey was long, much longer than I anticipated. This is when Marta goes to visit her in her room for the first time. I will sleep for a time, and then you will return, and we will begin our work. What work? Said Marta. Do not ask ridiculous questions, my little ray of light, said the Countess. Tomorrow we will begin. This is all you need to know. You must close the door when you leave. She waved a languid hand in the direction of the door, and then she pulled the covers up over her head and disappeared entirely. Marta backed out of room 314. She closed the door behind her very gently. From inside the room came the sound of Blitzkopf keening. My little ray of light. That is what the Countess had called her. My little ray of light. Simple things that get you into the head of the main character, what they're thinking. It's so, so important, not only in your writing. It's called internal thoughts. To put that in your writing, write action, then write what the character is thinking. You just can't help but fall in love with this wonderful little girl, Marta. And so, again, that ends our second episode. As I've mentioned many times, send me your thoughts, and I will send you emails back at kevmok21@gmail.com. What do you think of Spellhorse being on the luggage of the Countess? Do you think this is important? Do you think it's just something that the author just threw in there to mess with us? The parrots, what do you think of the parrot? What kind of meaning is the parrot going to have? Really haven't said how old Marta is. Maybe you might have a question about that. And do you think this is going to go in the direction of having some kind of fantasy as it relates to the parrot? Or do you think it's going to be more of a realistic fiction, realistic fiction type of story? Thank you again, and until next time on Mr. O'Keefe's Book Club. Have a great day.